The first time I heard the third siren, I was at my daughter's soccer game. This was April of last year. Calvert, a town of about 19,000 people in the Flathead Valley. I'd been a volunteer with Station 6 for 11 years. My wife Renee coached U12 girls travel. The field behind Calvert Middle School sits on a slight hill, and from there you can see most of downtown, the courthouse, the grain elevator, the two church steeples, and, if you know where to look, the pole-mounted federal signal on top of the Public Works building. We have two sirens in Calvert. The first is the noon test, a single steady tone, 45 seconds, every Wednesday. You grow up hearing it. It's municipal wallpaper. The second is the actual emergency activation, tornado warning, wildfire evacuation, chemical spill from the rail yard. That one is a rising and falling wail. In my 11 years, I'd heard it deployed maybe 6 times for real events. So when a third tone came out of that horn on a clear Saturday afternoon in April, not the steady test, not the wail, I noticed. Everyone noticed. It was lower than either authorized tone. Not a wail, not a steady blast. It pulsed. 3 seconds on, 2 seconds off, repeating. Like a heartbeat played through sheet metal. The sound carried differently too. The noon test bounces off the valley walls and comes back muddy. This one seemed to arrive from directly above, as though the speaker had been repositioned to face the sky instead of the town. The game stopped. 14 girls stood in the grass looking up. Renee had her whistle halfway to her mouth. Parents in their fold-out chairs turned toward downtown. 31 seconds. That's how long it lasted. I timed it unconsciously, a habit from dispatch years, marking duration of anything anomalous. Then silence. No one ran. No one panicked. It wasn't frightening in the moment. It was just deeply, structurally wrong, like hearing a third note in a 2-note chord you've listened to your entire life. I pulled out my phone and called the station. Billy Foss answered. He'd heard it too, from inside the bay. Already called Public Works, he said. They're checking. By Monday, Public Works had issued a statement, electrical malfunction in the tone generator's switching board. Capacitor degradation. The irregular pulse was a byproduct of partial circuit failure. They replaced the board. Case closed. I accepted that. Everyone did. The second time was June 14th. I was at the station for our bi-weekly drill night. 7 of us in the bay, doing hose maintenance. The horn activated at 8:47 p.m. Same pulse. Same low frequency. Same 31 seconds. We all stopped. Garza looked at me. Billy put down his coupling wrench. Wasn't that the same? Garza started. Yeah. This time I drove to the Public Works building. The horn sits on a 20-foot pole bolted to the roof. When I got there, the building was dark. Weekend maintenance staff had gone home at 5. The front door was locked. I walked around the building looking up at the horn. It was motionless. The cone faced outward, toward downtown, same as always. I called Public Works the next morning. Spoke to a woman named Deidre in facilities management. We replaced that board in April, she said. I'll put in a ticket. It made the same sound, I said. Exact same. Same duration. I'll put in a ticket. If you're awake right now, listening to this kind of thing in the dark, I'm glad someone is. You can subscribe if you want. I don't tell this to people in town anymore. The ticket was resolved on June 20th. This time they replaced the entire tone generator. I know because I called Deidre back and asked. She emailed me a scan of the work order. New unit. New wiring. Full diagnostic passed. July 9th, 10:02 p.m. 31 seconds. Same tone. I was home. Renee was reading in bed. She looked up and said, "Is that the weird siren again?" I went outside. You could hear it clearly from our porch, about 1.25 miles from the source. The same low pulse, 3 on 2 off, arriving from a direction that didn't quite match where the horn physically sits. This time I didn't call Public Works. I called the fire chief directly. Dennis Hargrove, 23 years in the department. I heard it, he said. I'm looking into it. They replaced the whole unit, Dennis. 2 weeks ago. I know. Then what is it? He was quiet for a moment. Then, I don't know yet. But I'm asking you not to make noise about it publicly. Let me work through channels. I respected Dennis. I let it go. For a while. August. No siren. September, none. I started to believe the replacement had eventually worked, or whatever electrical fault existed had burned itself out. Then October 3rd. This time I wasn't home. I was in my truck on Route 7, heading back from a supply run in Whitefish. The siren reached me through the open window at a distance of 4 miles. That shouldn't be possible. The Federal Signal Model 508 has an effective range of roughly 1 mile in open terrain. 2 miles under perfect atmospheric conditions. I was 4 miles out, driving at 55, and the sound was clear. Not faint. Clear. 31 seconds. I pulled over and timed the last 18 seconds of it. 3 on 2 off. Exact. When I got home, I sent a text to Garza. Did you hear it? Yeah. 6:41. I checked my truck's clock log. I'd pulled over at 6:41. The next drill night, I brought it up. 7 of us in the bay again, and I asked who had heard the October siren. All 7 raised their hands. But when I asked each person to describe what they'd been doing and what direction the sound came from, the answers diverged. Billy said it came from the south. He was at home, north of the Public Works building. That's consistent. Garza said east. He was at his mother-in-law's house on Vine, which is west of the Horn. Also consistent. Harlan Coe said it came from underneath him. He was in his basement. I said it came from the northwest. I was on Route 7, southeast of town. Everyone agreed it came from the direction of the Horn. But Harlan was in a basement with no line of sight to anything, and he said underneath. Not through the walls. Not from above. Underneath. I asked him to clarify. He looked uncomfortable. I don't know how else to describe it, he said. It sounded like it was in the foundation. Dennis wasn't at drill that night. He'd missed 2 in a row, which was unlike him. I called him the next day. He didn't answer. I called again the day after. When he finally picked up, he sounded tired. I've been in meetings with the county, he said. The siren isn't malfunctioning. Meaning what? Meaning the unit they installed in June has never activated. Not once. The diagnostic log is clean. No power draw from the tone generator at any point since installation. I sat with that. So something else is making the sound, I said. I didn't say that. Dennis. I'm telling you what the data shows. The horn hasn't fired. The sound exists. I don't have an explanation yet. I'm working on it. What are the county meetings about? I can't discuss that. He hung up. I need to tell you about Harlan, because what happened to him is where this stops being a curiosity and becomes something else. Harlan Coe had been with Station 6 for 9 years. Solid guy. Carpenter by trade, quiet, dependable. Never missed a call. After the October siren, he started missing calls. Not drill, actual dispatches. His pager would go off and he wouldn't respond. We'd mark him unavailable and roll without him. I stopped by his house on October 19th. His truck was in the driveway. Lights were on inside. He answered the door normally, but he looked like he'd lost about 10 pounds. You okay? I said. You've been off the board. He invited me in. His house was clean, normal. Coffee on the counter. TV on low in the living room. I need to ask you something, he said. And I need you to not think I'm losing it. Okay. Since October 3rd. The last time it sounded. Have you noticed anything missing? Missing how? From town. Have you noticed anything that used to be here that isn't anymore? I thought about it. Nothing came to mind. Like what? I said. He looked at his hands. The Wendy's on Blackfoot. What about it? It's not there. Harlan. The Wendy's is there. I drove past it yesterday. He looked at me and his expression was patient, but strained. Like he'd expected me to say that. Can you drive past it right now? He said. With me in the car. I said sure. We got in my truck and drove down to Blackfoot Avenue. The Wendy's was there. Red and white signage, drive-through lane, 3 cars in the lot. Harlan stared at it through the windshield for a long time. Okay, he said. Okay. I asked him what he was seeing. The Wendy's, he said. I see the Wendy's. But his voice was flat. And he didn't look relieved. I dropped him back home. At his front door, he turned and said, "When's the last time you ate there?" I don't know. A month ago maybe. Go eat there, he said. Tomorrow. Sit inside. Order something. Pay attention. I thought he was stressed. Maybe depressed. I told Renee about it and she said to give him space, maybe mention it to Dennis. But I went to the Wendy's the next day. Lunch. I sat inside with a sandwich and a coffee. Everything was normal. Staff behind the counter, a few families eating, the usual corporate decor. I spent 20 minutes there. Nothing was wrong. Except I couldn't remember driving there. I was sitting in the booth and I realized I had no memory of getting into my truck, driving the route, parking, walking in, or ordering. I was just there, mid-bite, as though I'd been cut from my kitchen and pasted into the seat. I looked at my phone. 12:34 p.m. The last thing in my memory before the booth was standing in my kitchen at 11:50, deciding to go. 44 minutes. Gone. I left. I remember leaving. I remember every second of the drive home. But getting there, nothing. I called Harlan. "Yeah," he said. "That's what I mean." "What is it?" "It's not the Wendy specifically. It's whatever the siren is taking. It takes the time around certain places. Or certain things. I haven't figured out the pattern yet. But since October 3rd, I lose time whenever I get near certain locations." "How many locations?" 11. "So far. 11 places in town where you lose time. Where the approach disappears. I arrive. I'm there. But I never traveled." I asked him for the list. He'd written it down. I have it in front of me now. Wendy's on Blackfoot. Calvert Public Library, West Entrance. The Shell Station on Route 7. Pinecrest Cemetery, South Gate. The middle school soccer field. His own basement. The parking lot behind First Lutheran. Unit 4 at Storage Plus on Industrial. The pedestrian bridge over Calvert Creek. The old railroad depot, now a real estate office. The Public Works building roof. I recognized the last one immediately. "That's where the horn is." "Have you gone up there?" I asked. "I can't," he said. I tried. I drove to the building, parked, walked to the door. Next thing I know, I'm back in my truck driving home. No memory of turning around. November. No siren. I began testing Harlan's list. I drove to each location deliberately, staying conscious of the process. Narrating to myself. I'm turning left onto Blackfoot. I'm approaching the Wendy's. I'm pulling into the lot. Nothing happened. Every trip was normal. Full continuity. I remembered everything. I told Harlan. He nodded slowly. "It's not doing it to you yet," he said. Yet. I think the October one was just me. I was closest to it. In the foundation. I remembered, he'd been in his basement. He said the sound came from underneath. "What do you mean closest?" "I mean I think the sound enters you from the nearest surface." I was surrounded by it. Concrete on all sides. Most people were outdoors or in above-ground rooms. I was immersed in the material it was moving through. This is where I should tell you that I spent 2 weeks trying to verify any of this objectively. I put a dashcam in my truck. I timed every trip to every location on Harlan's list. I checked timestamps, GPS logs, fuel consumption. Everything was consistent. No lost time. No anomalies. But on November 8th, Garza told me he'd lost time at the Shell station on Route 7. Same description. He was pumping gas. Next moment he was back in his car, tank full, driving away. He couldn't remember finishing, couldn't remember hanging up the nozzle, couldn't remember getting back in the vehicle. Just a clean splice from standing at the pump to being in motion on the road. I asked when the last siren had been. October 3rd. I asked where he'd been when he heard it. At the station. Bay door was open. Which direction did the sound come from? East, he said. Then paused. Actually, I don't know. I just remember it being inside the bay. Not coming from a direction. Just, inside. 3 on 2 off. 31 seconds. By late November, I had confirmed that 4 members of Station 6 had experienced lost time at locations on Harlan's list. Harlan himself at 11 sites. Garza at 2. Billy Foss at 1, the library. And Kelly Tremont, our newest volunteer, at the soccer field. I hadn't lost time anywhere. I was outdoors during every Siren event. In my truck on Route 7, on my porch, at the soccer game in the open air. Never enclosed. Never surrounded by a surface the sound could saturate. December 4th. I'd been monitoring. Waiting. Part of me wanted it to happen again so I could get out in front of it, place audio recorders at the Public Works building, measure the frequency properly, have instruments running when it activated. I bought a second-hand spectrum analyzer off eBay. I set up a recording station in my garage with a directional microphone aimed at the Public Works building's roof. December 4th, 3:17 a.m. I was asleep. Renee shook me awake. "It's happening," she said. I could hear it. Through the walls. Through the floor. 3 on 2 off. That low, thoracic pulse. I was in bed. Under a roof. Surrounded by drywall and insulation and plywood and siding. I lunged for the bedroom door. Got downstairs. Got outside. The sound was still going. I counted. 1 pulse. 2. 3. Silence. I'd caught maybe 9 seconds of it outdoors. The rest, 22 seconds, I'd been inside. Inside the materials. My recording equipment in the garage captured nothing. The spectrum analyzer showed a flat line from 3 to 3:30 a.m. Whatever this is doesn't register on instruments. It isn't sound. Not technically. Not in any way a microphone can confirm. But I heard it. Renee heard it. And the next morning, I drove to the Wendy's. 11:15 a.m. I was sitting in the booth. I don't remember arriving. I went to Harlan's that afternoon. He opened the door and I could see it in his face, he knew. "How many for you now?" he asked. 1. "It'll be more." "What happens when it's all of them?" "When you lose time at every location." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I don't think you lose time. I think you lose the traveling. The moving between places. Eventually you're just at places. With no between. That doesn't make sense." "No. It doesn't." I asked him about Dennis. Whether the chief had told him anything about the county meetings. "Dennis stopped returning my calls in October," he said. "I went to his house. His wife said he's on administrative leave. She didn't say from what." 3:17 a.m. That number stayed with me. The other occurrences had been scattered, afternoon, evening, night. But December 4th was the first one that happened while most of the town was asleep. While most people were inside their homes. Surrounded. I started sleeping in my truck. In the driveway, windows down, no roof overhead. Renee thought I was having a crisis. I couldn't explain it properly. I told her I needed air. She gave me a look, the particular look spouses give when they can see something is wrong but the explanation won't fit into the space available for conversation. January. No siren. February. No siren. By March I'd moved back into the bedroom. I felt foolish. The lost time at the Wendy's had not repeated. I drove to every location on Harlan's list and remembered every second of every trip. Maybe December was an isolated event. Maybe I'd been half asleep, confused, manufactured the memory gap out of expectation. Then Harlan disappeared. March 11th. His truck was in his driveway. His house was unlocked. Coffee was on the counter, still warm. No sign of disturbance. His phone was on the kitchen table. His boots were by the door. We searched. Fire department, sheriff's office, state police by day 3. Dogs. Helicopter. Nothing. He was just gone. No, that's not exactly right. He was gone and his house was wrong. I was in there with the sheriff's deputy during the search coordination, and I noticed it. Harlan's kitchen had a window over the sink that looked out onto his backyard. I'd stood at that window a dozen times over the years, washing my hands after helping him with deck repairs or whatever. The window was still there. The backyard was still there. But there was no distance between them. The glass and the yard existed in the same plane. I couldn't explain it better than that. It wasn't a visual distortion. It wasn't a trick of light. It was the absence of the space you'd cross to get from one to the other. The deputy didn't seem to notice. He walked through the kitchen normally. But I saw him take one step from the counter to the back door, and that distance should have been 4 steps. He covered it in 1. And he didn't seem to realize. I left. I sat in my truck outside Harlan's house and I called Garza. "Meet me at the station," I said. "What's wrong?" "Just meet me." At the station, I told Garza what I'd noticed. He went quiet. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Last week, I drove to the Shell station. I remember getting in my truck, and I remember being there. But Billy says I left the house on foot. He was across the street. He says I walked south on Vine, away from the station. He says I was walking for about 10 minutes before I disappeared around the corner on Maple. The Shell station is north." "I know. You walked the wrong direction." "I don't remember walking at all. I was in my truck." April 2nd. 3:17 a.m. I was outside. I'd started sleeping in the truck again after Harlan. Windows down. Clear sky. The siren came. I heard it, but it was different this time. Not in quality, the pitch was the same, the pulse was the same, the duration was the same. But it didn't seem to be arriving from a direction. It was simply present. Everywhere at once. In the air, in the gravel under my tires, in the metal frame of the truck. 31 seconds. I was awake for all of it. I counted every pulse. I was outside, surrounded by nothing but air and open sky. When it ended, I checked the time. 3:17 had passed. 3:18 now. Normal. I looked at my house. It was 12 feet from the truck. Front door, porch light, Renee's shoes on the mat. I couldn't remember how to get to the front door. Not that I'd lost the memory. I could see the door. I could see the 12 feet of walkway between me and it. But the how, the sequence of movements, the act of crossing space, was gone. Not forgotten. Absent. Like a word removed from a language entirely so that the concept it described ceases to exist. I sat in the truck for 45 minutes. Eventually the knowledge returned. Gradually, like circulation coming back to a sleeping limb. By 4 a.m., I could get out of the truck and walk inside normally. But for those 45 minutes, I understood what Harlan meant. The siren doesn't take time. It takes transit. The act of moving from one place to another. The experience of crossing distance. It's removing the between from the world. Harlan lost it at 11 locations. Then the 12th, from wherever he was standing in his kitchen to wherever he went, had no between left to cross. He didn't disappear. He simply arrived somewhere with no journey. And wherever that is, there's no path back. Because paths are made of the thing being taken. I haven't heard the siren since April 2nd. That was 13 months ago. I've been tracking my own experience carefully. I can still travel normally. I drive to work, to the grocery store, to the station. I remember every trip. But here's what I've noticed, I no longer take detours. I used to. I'd take the long way home, drive past the river, loop through the east side of town for no reason. Scenic routes. Unnecessary movement. I loved driving. Loved the in-between of going somewhere. I don't do that anymore. Not because I've decided to stop. Because the impulse is gone. The desire to be in transit, to exist in the space between departure and arrival, has quietly emptied out of me. I go where I need to go. I get there. I don't linger in the going. And I've noticed it in others. Calvert used to have people walking for pleasure. Evening walkers, morning joggers, teenagers circling the block on bikes for no reason. That's thinning. Not gone, but thinner. People arrive at places. They don't seem to move between them as much. The soccer field is quiet. Not abandoned, there are still games, still kids. But nobody seems to walk there. They're just there, and then they're home. The transition is shrinking. Garza moved to Billings in September. He said it stopped when he left town. I asked him to describe the drive out. What drive, he said. The drive to Billings. When you moved. I packed my apartment. Then I was here. You don't remember the drive. There wasn't one. He said it calmly. Like it was obvious. Like of course you don't drive between places. You're at one, and then you're at the other. He didn't understand why I was concerned. I'm still here. I still remember what transit feels like. I still experience the space between places, the minutes in the truck, the walk to the mailbox, the slow crossing of a parking lot. I still have it. But it's getting thinner. Last week, I walked to the station. A 20-minute walk I've done hundreds of times. I remember leaving my house. I remember arriving at the station. But the middle, the 20 minutes of sidewalks and stop signs and the particular way the light changes on Oak Street at midday, I'm not sure it was there. I'm not sure I was anywhere during those 20 minutes. I don't know what happens when all the between is gone. When every person in Calvert exists only at locations, with no experience of movement, no sensation of crossing distance. Maybe nothing changes visibly. Maybe people still technically move, their bodies still traverse space. But the experience of it, the consciousness of transit, the feeling of being somewhere between two places, gone. Maybe the siren doesn't come from the public works building. Maybe it comes from the between itself. From the spaces people cross. And each time it sounds, it's not activating. It's contracting. Drawing itself in. 31 seconds. 3 on 2 off. A heartbeat. The space between places, breathing. Getting smaller. I drove home from the station tonight. I remember it. I'm holding on to that. The 18 minutes of road, the left turn on Vine, the way the radio hums between stations. I arrived home and I still have every second of the trip inside me. But tomorrow I have to go back. And I'm no longer certain there will be a road between here and there when I do. That was 3 weeks ago. I wrote that paragraph sitting at my kitchen table at 11:40 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I meant every word of it. But I need to keep going. Because things have continued. And because writing this down, the act of describing the sequence, the progression from one thought to the next, is itself an act of transit. A movement from beginning to end. And I need to know I can still do that. April 18th. I woke up at 6:15 a.m. Renee was already in the shower. I lay in bed and listened to the water running, and I performed a test I've been doing every morning for 2 months. I reconstructed the previous day in sequence. Not just the events, the transitions. I got up. I walked to the kitchen. I drove to the hardware store. I drove home. I walked from the truck to the porch. Every segment intact. Every crossing remembered. 6:22 a.m. I got up. Walked to the bathroom. Brushed my teeth. Renee came out in her towel, said good morning, went to the closet. I went downstairs. Put on coffee. Stood at the counter and watched the drip cycle, which takes 4 minutes and 30 seconds. I timed it. Not because I needed to, but because duration is a form of between. The coffee was becoming. Moving from not ready to ready. I wanted to feel that movement happen. It did. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Normal. I drove to work. I work at a building supply warehouse on the north end of town, nothing to do with fire service, that's all volunteer. The drive takes 11 minutes from my driveway to the employee lot. I narrated the entire drive to myself. Turning right on Oak. Passing the Presbyterian Church. Stopping at the light on Blackfoot and Route 7. Left onto Industrial. Passing the Storage Plus facility. Pulling into the lot. 11 minutes. I remember all of them. But here's what I noticed when I got to work. I pulled into the lot, turned off the engine, and sat there. And I tried to recall not the route, I had that, but the sensation of the drive. The feeling of my hands on the wheel during the left turn. The slight bounce of the truck over the railroad tracks on Industrial. The particular boredom of waiting at the light. Gone. I had the facts. I had the sequence. I could recite every landmark in order. But the texture of being inside those 11 minutes, the lived experience of occupying the transit, was flat. Like reading a list instead of living a morning. This is the progression. Harlan lost the time outright. Garza lost the memory. I'm losing something finer. The phenomenology. The qualia, if you want to get philosophical about it. The part of movement that isn't information but experience. And I don't think I'm the only one. I think the whole town is losing it at different rates, and most people don't notice because most people don't inventory their own consciousness with this level of granularity. You have to be looking for it. You have to care about the difference between knowing you drove somewhere and remembering what driving felt like. April 22nd. Drill night at the station. 5 of us now, we lost Harlan, and Garza moved away, and Dennis is still on administrative leave. Billy, Kelly, Marcus Webb, Tomas Fuentes, and me. We ran a pump drill in the bay. Normal procedure. Afterward, we sat around the table in the kitchen area and Billy brought it up. Anyone else notice the town's quieter? It's always quiet, Marcus said. No, I mean, there's less people out. Walking around. I drove through downtown Saturday afternoon. It's not empty, it's just, people are at places, but they're not between them. I passed maybe 2 cars on Main. That's a Saturday. Kelly nodded slowly. I walked to the post office yesterday and I was the only person on the sidewalk for 6 blocks. That's never happened. You walked? I said. Yeah. You remember the walk? She looked at me. Of course. Describe it. She opened her mouth, paused, then said, I walked to the post office. No, describe the walk. What did you see? What did the air feel like? What did you pass? She stared at me for maybe 5 seconds. Her face didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted. A small confusion. Like reaching for a jar on a shelf and finding the shelf shorter than you remembered. I passed houses, she said. The usual houses. Which ones? The ones on the way to the post office. Kelly. Name one. She couldn't. She'd walked 6 blocks through a town she's lived in for 4 years and she could not name a single thing she'd passed. Not because she'd forgotten. Because there was nothing to forget. The transit had been hollow. A tube between 2 points with no interior. The table was quiet after that. Tomas said, I don't walk anywhere anymore. I'm just being honest. I drive everywhere now. Even to places I used to walk. And even the driving feels, he stopped. Feels what? I said. Short. Like the distances are shorter than they used to be. I know they're not. I checked my odometer. Same mileage. But it feels like everything is closer. Because the between is shrinking, I said. They all looked at me, and I told them everything. Harlan's list. The lost time. The December siren. My own experience. The texture disappearing. All of it. When I finished, Billy leaned back in his chair and said, So what do we do? I didn't have an answer. April 28th. I went to see Dennis. His wife, Carol, answered the door. She looked tired. Not upset, not frightened. Just depleted in a way that suggested sustained, low-level stress over months. He's in the study, she said. He might talk to you. He won't talk to the department. Dennis was at his desk. The room was dim, curtains drawn, desk lamp on. He had papers spread out in front of him. When I came in, he didn't look surprised. Close the door, he said. I did. You've noticed, he said. It wasn't a question. Since December. He nodded. Sit down. I sat in the chair across from his desk. He gathered some of the papers and turned them toward me. They were county records. Public Works maintenance logs going back to 1987. The siren system was installed in 1974, he said. Federal grant. Civil defense. 1 horn, 1 location. Standard 2-tone system, test and emergency. That's all that was ever installed. That's all that was ever authorized. The 3rd tone. There is no 3rd tone. There never was. Not in any specification, any manual, any engineering document. The switching board doesn't have a third circuit. The new generator they installed in June doesn't have the capability to produce that frequency. I had an acoustic engineer from Missoula drive down in November. He examined the entire system. His conclusion was that the horn has never produced the sound we've been hearing. Then what is it? Dennis pulled a different set of papers from under the stack. These were older. Mimeographed. The type was faded blue, the paper brittle. 1952 County Survey, he said. Geological assessment for the municipal water system expansion. They were mapping underground formations to determine where to route new pipes. He pointed to a passage highlighted in yellow. I leaned forward and read it. Subsurface acoustic anomaly noted at survey point 14, grid reference NW 7. Intermittent low-frequency pulse observed by field team during overnight monitoring, duration approximately 30 seconds, recurring at irregular intervals. Source unidentified. Not consistent with known geological activity. Recommend avoidance of survey point 14 for pipe routing due to potential interference with acoustic monitoring equipment. 1952, I said. 22 years before the siren was installed. I read it again. Intermittent low-frequency pulse. Duration approximately 30 seconds. It was already here, I said. It was always here. The siren didn't produce the sound. The sound found the siren. Used it. Used the infrastructure that was already pointing at the sky. Dennis pulled out a map. Calvert, with survey grid overlay. He'd marked survey point 14 with a red circle. It was directly beneath the Public Works building. They built on top of it, I said. In 1961. The Public Works building was constructed in 1961. The survey said to avoid the point. 12 years later, the county built there anyway. 9 years after that, they mounted a horn on the roof. And gave it a voice. Dennis looked at me. Or gave it a target. I've gone back through county records. Every document related to survey point 14 after 1952 has been, not redacted. Not removed. Just, absent. The 1952 survey itself was in a filing cabinet in the county clerk's basement. Misfiled under road salt contracts. I only found it because I was looking for something else and it was physically between two unrelated folders. The county meetings, I said. You told me in October you were meeting with the county. I met with the county engineer. Once. He'd never heard of survey point 14. He said the 1952 survey wasn't in their system. He said there was no record of any acoustic anomaly at that location. He suggested I might be experiencing stress. And then I was placed on administrative leave. For health reasons. Pending evaluation. He said this flatly. Without anger. They don't know, I said. The county doesn't know. The institutional memory of it is gone. Or the between has been removed from that too, Dennis said quietly. That stopped me. Think about it, he said. Institutional memory is a transit. A chain of knowledge passed from one person to the next. A connection between the person who knew in 1952 and the person who should know now. That's a form of between. A path from then to now. If the path is removed, the knowledge was never lost. It just can't be reached. He nodded. I looked at the papers on his desk. The highlighted passage. The map. Why can you still reach it? I said. Why did you find this? Dennis was quiet for a long time. Because I'm not traveling anymore, he said. What do you mean? I haven't left this house in 4 months. Not once. Carol brings everything. I work here, I sleep here, I exist here. I stopped moving between places entirely. And since I stopped, I can see the connections. The paths between things. The between that other people are losing, I can see it because I'm not using it. I'm not feeding it anything. I stared at him. You think movement feeds it? I think transit is what it consumes. The act of crossing distance. The experience of being between 2 points. Every time you move from here to there, it takes a piece of that experience. Not immediately. Not all at once. Over time. Over repetitions. The siren isn't causing it, the siren is the breathing. The rhythm of digestion. 3:17 a.m. 31 seconds. 3 on 2 off. A heartbeat. Something underneath Calvert, eating the distance between things. Harlan, I said. Harlan moved too much. He went everywhere. He fed it 11 locations worth of transit before he realized. And then he had nothing left. No between. He was at a point and there was nowhere to go because going no longer existed for him. Where is he? He's at his house. Or he's at the Wendy's. Or he's at any of the 11 places. All simultaneously. He didn't disappear, he just stopped having any distance between himself and everywhere he'd been. He's collapsed into his own pattern. I felt sick. Not afraid. Not dread. Physically nauseated. Like vertigo, but for a different axis. What do I do? I said. Dennis looked at me with an expression I'll remember for the rest of my life. It was compassion and exhaustion and something that might have been envy. Stop moving, he said. Stay somewhere. Any one place. And stop. May 3rd. I didn't stop moving. I couldn't. I have a job. I have a family. I have a life that requires transit, every life does. You can't exist in a single point. Dennis could because he had Carol, because he had leave, because he'd made the choice early enough that he still had enough between left to sustain consciousness at a single location. But I noticed, after my visit to Dennis, the drive home felt different. Not shorter. Not hollow. But thin. Like the experience of driving was a sheet of paper instead of a solid thing. I could feel it, but barely. The way you feel a single bedsheet on your skin versus a heavy blanket. I started keeping a log. Every trip. Every transit. Duration in minutes, and a subjective rating from 1 to 10 of how present the experience felt. How thick. How real. May 3rd, drive to work, 11 minutes, presence rating 4 out of 10. May 3rd, walk from lot to warehouse, 2 minutes, presence rating 6 out of 10. May 3rd, drive home, 11 minutes, presence rating 3 out of 10. May 4th, drive to work, 11 minutes, presence rating 4 out of 10. May 4th, walk to break room, 30 seconds, presence rating 7 out of 10. May 4th, drive home, 11 minutes, presence rating 2 out of 10. The pattern was immediate. Short transits held more presence. Long ones were thinning faster. The 11-minute drive was becoming almost transparent. The 30-second walk still felt mostly real. By May 10th, my drive to work was a 1. I still did it. I still remember it factually. But the experience is like remembering a sentence you read versus a moment you lived. It has information but no weight. May 12th, something changed. I left for work at 7:45 a.m. I arrived at 7:45 a.m. Not 7:56. Not 11 minutes later. My clock at home said 7:45 when I closed the front door. My truck's clock said 7:45 when I pulled into the lot. My phone said 7:45 when I walked into the warehouse. 0 transit time. 11 minutes of road, and no time passed. I checked every clock I could find. All consistent. 7:45 across the board. I sat in the warehouse break room and stared at my hands and tried to feel anything about what had just happened. Terror. Confusion. Wonder. Anything. What I felt was, nothing. A mild acknowledgement. Of course it was instant. Why would it take time? The distance between home and work is a formality. A convention. You don't actually need to cross it. And that thought, that of course, scared me more than the event itself. Because it wasn't my thought. It was the thought of someone who has already accepted that between doesn't exist. And I haven't accepted that. I refuse to accept that. But my reflexes have. May 14th. I did something I probably shouldn't have. I drove to the Public Works building. 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. The building was open, normal business hours. I walked inside, nodded to the receptionist, and took the stairs to the roof access door. It's supposed to be locked, but it wasn't. The knob turned freely. The roof is flat. Gravel and tar paper. The horn sits on its pole at the northeast corner, cone aimed outward at a slightly downward angle. Standard federal signal, painted civil defense yellow. Unremarkable. I walked to the base of the pole. Stood there. Listened. Nothing. Just wind and distant traffic. I looked down. The roof surface was normal. Gravel, seams, a few puddles from recent rain. Then I stepped to the edge of the building and looked at the ground below. The sidewalk. The parking lot. The street beyond. And I couldn't see them continuously. The parking lot was there. The street was there. But the space between the building and those things, the 15 feet of air, the distance my eye should have tracked smoothly from roof to ground, stuttered. Like a video with frames missing. My gaze went from here to there with no smooth transition. No glide. No continuous movement of attention across distance. I stepped back from the edge. The roof beneath my feet was solid. I was at a location. That was still fine. Being somewhere was still fine. But looking across distance, even that was starting to erode. Not just physical transit. Perceptual transit. The act of moving your attention from one point to another through the space between them. I went back downstairs. The receptionist said, "Find what you needed," and I said yes and walked out. I drove home and what my clock said was 0 minutes. May 16th, 3:17 a.m. The siren. I was in bed. Renee beside me. I heard it and I didn't move. I lay there and I counted the pulses and I made a choice. I would not go outside. I would not try to escape it. I would let it pass through me, through the house, through whatever material surrounded me. Because it didn't matter anymore. Inside, outside, the effect was the same. The between was being consumed regardless of where I was when the breathing happened. 31 seconds. 10 pulses. 3 on 2 off. When it ended, I turned to Renee. She was awake. Looking at the ceiling. You hear it? I said. Hear what? The siren. Just now. She turned to me. What siren? She hadn't heard it. I lay there in the dark and felt something I can only describe as terminal loneliness. Not because my wife didn't believe me, but because her experience of the sound had been consumed entirely. She'd heard every previous siren. She'd woken me in December. But now, the between her and the event had been removed. The connection between her ears and the sound, the perceptual transit of pressure waves crossing the air to reach her, gone. The siren still existed. I could still hear it. But it was no longer reaching other people. Only those of us who were already deep in the process. May 17th. I called Billy, Kelly, Marcus, Tomas. Billy heard it. Kelly heard it. Marcus did not. Tomas did not. 4 of us remaining who could still perceive it. Who still had enough between left to receive something crossing distance toward us. Billy said, it sounded closer. Kelly said, it sounded like it was in my chest. I said, it sounded like it was the last time anything would cross the air to reach me. We didn't have a drill that week. I'm not sure any of us went to the station. I'm not sure going means what it used to. May 18th, yesterday. I performed my morning test. Reconstructed the previous day in sequence. I woke up. I spoke to Renee. I called the others. I ate dinner. I went to bed. But when I tried to reconstruct the transitions, the walks between rooms, the reach from counter to cabinet, the small crossings of domestic space that make up an entire day at home, they were gone. Not faded. Not thin. Gone. I was at the bed and then I was at the table and then I was at the phone and then I was at the counter. No between. No hallway. No steps. No crossing. It has reached my home. The smallest distances. The 3 feet between the stove and the refrigerator. The 10 steps between the bedroom and the bathroom. The space I cross most unconsciously, most repetitively, most fundamentally. Being consumed. And I think the siren isn't coming back. I think what happened on May 16th was the last one. Because the siren itself is a sound that travels. That crosses distance from a source to an ear. And if the between is almost gone, if there's barely enough transit left in this town to carry a sound wave from one point to another, then the breathing has gotten so quiet because there's almost nothing left to breathe. The heart is slowing because the body is almost consumed. I'm writing this at my kitchen table. It's 11:52 p.m. Renee is upstairs. I can hear the house settling around me, small creaks, the furnace cycling, the refrigerator compressor. Those sounds still reach me. They still cross the air. There's still a tiny membrane of between holding the world together in here. But I can feel it thinning. Tomorrow morning, I will try to walk to the bathroom. I'll try to feel my feet on the floor during the crossing. I'll try to notice the hallway, the light through the window, the photograph on the wall, the particular creak of the 3rd floorboard. And if I can't, if I'm simply in the bedroom and then simply in the bathroom with nothing in between, then I'll know the last of it is gone. Harlan was wrong about one thing. He said eventually you're just at places. Like it's a static condition. Like you collapse into a point and stay there. But I don't think that's what happens at the end. I think what happens is, when all the between is gone, there's northwest difference between one place and another. Because the only thing that made places different was the distance between them. The journey that separated here from there. Remove that, and everywhere is the same point. Every location is every other location. You don't collapse into one place. You expand into all of them simultaneously. Like Harlan. Everywhere at once. Not gone. Not dead. Just no longer distinguishable from the space he used to cross. Become the between. The thing that eats the traveling becomes the traveling. A road with no one on it. A hallway with no one walking. A distance crossed by nothing but itself, forever. I'm going to stand up now. I'm going to walk to the stairs. I'm going to climb them. I'm going to open my bedroom door and see my wife sleeping, and I'm going to lie down beside her. And I am going to be conscious of every single second of that transit. Every footfall. Every breath between steps. Every inch of hallway. Because it might be the last time any of those inches exist for me. And because, and I need to say this clearly, I don't think I can stop it. Dennis stopped moving and he preserved himself. But Dennis made that choice in December, when he still had enough between to sustain a life in one room. I don't have that option anymore. My between is too thin to hold a single location together. If I stop moving, I'll collapse. And if I keep moving, I feed it. There is no remaining strategy. There is only this: I'm going to walk upstairs, and I'm going to pay attention, and I'm going to remember what it felt like. And if I wake up tomorrow in a world without distance, if there are no more hallways, no more roads, no more space between my hand and what it reaches for, at least I'll have this one last crossing. At least I'll have carried myself home one more time. It's 11:58 p.m. now. I'm putting down the pen. I can hear Renee's breathing from upstairs. It's reaching me through the floor, through 12 feet of air and wood and plaster. It's still crossing distance to find me. While that's true, I'm still here. While something can still travel between us, neither of us has disappeared. I'm standing up now. I'm walking. I'm paying attention.